The wind howled like a hungry wolf, rattling the windows of Martha's small, worn-down house. Inside, the fire in the hearth struggled to stay alive, much like Martha herself. She was a wisp of a woman, her face etched with wrinkles that told stories of hardship and loss. Her husband, Thomas, had been gone for 2 years now, taken by a sudden illness that left her utterly alone. He had been a strong, gentle man, and together they had weathered many storms. But without him, the storms felt fiercer, the nights colder. Martha wasn't always lonely. Before Thomas passed, their little house was filled with laughter and the aroma of freshly baked bread. They had friends, neighbors who would stop by for a chat and a cup of tea. But after Thomas was gone, the visits dwindled. People had their own lives, their own struggles. Martha understood, but the silence still echoed in her heart. Now winter had gripped the land in an icy fist. The crops had failed the previous autumn, and food was scarce. Martha's small savings were dwindling fast. Each day was a battle against hunger and despair. She rationed what little food she had left, making it last as long as possible. But even she knew it wouldn't be enough. She thought of Thomas often, remembering his comforting presence and strong arms. "What would you have me do, my love?" she'd whisper into the empty room. She knew he would have wanted her to survive, to keep her spirit alive. So, with a heavy heart but a determined glint in her eye, Martha decided she had to ask for help. It was the hardest thing she'd ever had to do, but she knew she had no other choice. The decision weighed heavily on Martha as she bundled herself in her threadbare coat and ventured out into the biting wind. The town of Oakhaven was usually a cheerful place, with bustling markets and friendly faces. But the harsh winter had cast a long shadow over everything. The marketplace, once overflowing with produce, was now sparsely populated, the few vendors selling their goods at exorbitant prices. People hurried along the streets, their heads bowed against the wind, their faces grim. The fields surrounding Oakhaven were barren, covered in a thick blanket of snow. The river, usually teeming with fish, was frozen solid. Even the animals seemed to sense the hardship, huddling together for warmth and conserving their energy. The atmosphere was thick with desperation. Families argued over scraps of food, and suspicion lingered in the air. Neighbors who once shared everything now eyed each other with distrust. Martha remembered a time when the community would have rallied together, sharing what little they had to ensure everyone survived. But this winter was different. The scarcity was unprecedented, pushing people to their limits. The bonds of friendship and community were strained to the breaking point. Fear and hunger had turned people inward, making them prioritize their own survival above all else. It was in this environment of desperation and scarcity that Martha was about to ask for help, unaware of the reception she would receive. The cheerful Oakhaven she once knew seemed to have vanished, replaced by a cold, unforgiving version of itself. The wind howled a mournful song, a constant reminder of the difficult times that lay ahead. Martha first approached the Miller family, remembering the countless times she and Thomas had shared laughter and stories with them over cups of hot cider. She knocked timidly on their door, her heart pounding in her chest. A gruff voice answered, and the Millers' eldest son, a young man named Samuel, peered out. "What do you want, Martha?" he asked, his tone impatient. "Samuel, dear," Martha began, her voice trembling slightly. "I know times are hard, but I was wondering if you might have a little something to spare. Just a bit of flour, perhaps, or a few potatoes. I'm running quite low." Samuel's face hardened. "We have nothing to spare, Martha," he said coldly. "We have our own family to feed. You should have planned better." He slammed the door in her face, leaving Martha standing in the freezing wind, tears welling up in her eyes. She tried another neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a woman she had often helped with her gardening. But Mrs. Gable, her face gaunt and drawn, simply shook her head. "I'm sorry, Martha," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I wish I could help, but we're barely surviving ourselves." At her third attempt at the house of the Burkes, things turned violent. She barely got the words out before Mr. Burke started yelling. He accused her of being lazy and entitled, saying she was trying to take advantage of their hard work. His words were like knives, cutting deep into Martha's soul. Then he shoved her roughly, and his wife joined in, pushing and shoving Martha until she fell to the ground. They yelled at her to leave and never come back. Bruised and heartbroken, Martha stumbled away, the hope that had flickered within her extinguished. Dragging herself back to her little house, Martha felt a despair so profound it threatened to swallow her whole. Every bone in her body ached, not just from the cold and the fall, but from a deep, soul-crushing weariness. The bruises on her arms and legs were nothing compared to the wounds on her heart. She had been prepared for rejection, perhaps even harsh words, but the violence that she had not expected. Inside her house, the fire had dwindled to mere embers, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The silence was deafening, amplifying her loneliness. She sank into her worn armchair, the familiar cushions offering little comfort. Tears streamed down her face, hot against her cold skin. She hadn't cried this much since Thomas died. What was she going to do? Her food was almost gone, and now she knew she couldn't rely on anyone in Oakhaven. The town she had called home for so many years had turned against her. The people she had considered friends had become strangers, even enemies. The thought of facing another day filled with hunger and isolation was almost unbearable. She looked around the small room, at the faded photographs on the mantelpiece, the chipped teacups on the shelf, the worn quilt on the bed, all remnants of a happier time, reminders of a life that was now gone. A wave of grief washed over her, threatening to pull her under. She felt utterly alone, abandoned, and forgotten. The hope that had sustained her through the difficult months after Thomas's death had finally flickered out, leaving her in the darkness of despair. "Thomas," she whispered, her voice choked with sobs. "I don't know what to do anymore." Meanwhile, on the outskirts of Oakhaven, John was tending to his cattle. His ranch, a sprawling expanse of land nestled against the foothills, was a beacon of hope in the desolate landscape. John was a man of the earth, his hands calloused, his face weathered by the sun and wind. He possessed a quiet strength and an unwavering sense of justice. He was known throughout the county for his generosity and his willingness to help those in need. He had heard whispers of the hardships in Oakhaven, of the failed crops and the growing desperation. He had done what he could to help, donating food and supplies to the town's struggling families. But he knew it wasn't enough. The winter was relentless, and the needs were great. John wasn't a man of many words, but his actions spoke volumes. He believed in hard work, honesty, and compassion. He treated everyone with respect, regardless of their station in life. He had a soft spot for the elderly and the vulnerable, always ready to lend a helping hand. He often spoke of his own grandmother, who had taught him the importance of kindness and empathy. As he surveyed his land, his gaze drifted towards Oakhaven. He felt a deep sense of unease, a nagging feeling that something was amiss. He decided to ride into town, to check on the situation and see if there was anything more he could do. He saddled his horse, a sturdy Appaloosa named Scout, and set off towards Oakhaven, unaware of the scene he was about to encounter and the life he was about to change. The wind carried the scent of snow and pine, a stark contrast to the human suffering that awaited him in the heart of the town. As John rode into Oakhaven, he noticed the tension in the air. People moved with a hurried desperation, their eyes darting nervously. He saw small children with gaunt faces and ragged clothes, their mothers struggling to keep them warm. The atmosphere was even more oppressive than he had imagined. He was about to stop and ask someone what was happening when he heard a commotion down a side street. The sound of angry voices rose above the howling wind. He urged Scout forward, his heart pounding with a sense of foreboding. Rounding the corner, he saw a sight that made his blood boil. A small group of people, including Mr. and Mrs. Burke, were standing over a figure huddled on the ground. He recognized the figure as Martha, her face pale and bruised. Mr. Burke was shouting at her, his face contorted with rage, while Mrs. Burke stood by, her arms crossed, a cruel smirk on her face. John couldn't hear exactly what they were saying, but he could see the anger and hatred in their eyes. He saw Mr. Burke raise his hand as if to strike Martha again. That was when John spurred Scout into action. He rode towards the group, his voice booming across the street. "Stop!" he shouted. "What do you think you're doing?" The sudden appearance of the imposing rancher on horseback startled the group, causing them to freeze in their tracks. John knew he had to act quickly to protect Martha from further harm. The scene unfolding before him confirmed his worst fears about the desperation that had gripped Oakhaven. The Burkes and their companions, momentarily stunned by John's arrival, quickly regained their composure. Mr. Burke stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "This is none of your business, John," he snarled. "This woman is a burden on our community. She's lazy and expects us to take care of her." John dismounted Scout, his eyes fixed on Mr. Burke. His voice was calm but firm. "I saw what you were doing, Burke, and I won't tolerate it. Treating a defenseless woman like this is shameful." He turned his attention to Martha, who was still huddled on the ground, trembling with fear and cold. He knelt beside her, his expression filled with concern. "Martha, are you all right?" he asked gently. Martha looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. She couldn't believe that someone was finally helping her. I'm all right, John," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. They didn't want to help me." John carefully helped Martha to her feet, supporting her frail frame. He turned back to the Burkes, his eyes blazing with anger. "I'm taking Martha back to my ranch," he said, his voice low and menacing. "And if I hear of anyone bothering her again, they'll have me to answer to." He held out his hand to Martha, his gaze reassuring. "Come on, Martha," he said softly. "You're safe now." As Martha placed her hand in John's strong, calloused one, a wave of relief washed over her. She felt a glimmer of hope flicker within her heart, a hope she thought she had lost forever. The warmth of his hand was a stark contrast to the cold cruelty she had just experienced. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. John helped Martha onto Scout, and they rode away from Oakhaven, leaving the Burkes and their companions staring after them in disbelief. The ride to the ranch was silent, but the silence was comforting, a stark contrast to the angry shouts and cruel words Martha had endured. She leaned against John's back, drawing strength from his presence. As they approached the ranch, Martha was struck by its warmth and welcoming atmosphere. The main house, a sturdy log cabin, glowed with light from the windows. Smoke curled invitingly from the chimney, promising warmth and comfort. The scent of wood smoke and baking bread filled the air, a welcome change from the cold, harsh smells of Oakhaven. John helped Martha down from Scout and led her inside the house. A crackling fire blazed in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the cozy room. A steaming pot of stew simmered on the stove, filling the air with a savory aroma. A kindly-looking woman with silver hair, introduced as Mrs. Peterson, John's housekeeper, greeted them with a warm smile. "Oh, you poor dear," Mrs. Peterson said, her eyes filled with compassion as she took in Martha's bruised and weary appearance. Come in and get warm. I'll get you something to eat." She led Martha to a comfortable chair near the fire and wrapped a thick quilt around her shoulders. Within minutes, Martha was sitting by the fire, sipping a cup of hot tea and enjoying a bowl of Mrs. Peterson's delicious stew. The warmth of the fire, the kindness of Mrs. Peterson, and the gentle concern in John's eyes began to thaw the ice that had formed around her heart. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe, cared for, and hopeful. The ranch was a haven, a sanctuary from the harsh realities of the world outside. Over the next few weeks, Martha settled into life at the ranch. She was given a cozy room of her own, filled with sunlight and warmth. She helped Mrs. Peterson with small tasks around the house, like mending clothes and tending to the herb garden. John, busy with his ranch duties, always made time to check on her, sharing stories and offering words of encouragement. She learned about John's life, his love for the land, his dedication to his cattle, and his unwavering commitment to helping others. She saw the respect he commanded from his ranch hands and the genuine affection he showed to his animals. She admired his strong work ethic and his quiet strength. In turn, Martha shared stories of her life with Thomas, of their years together in Oakhaven, of their joys and sorrows. She spoke of her love for gardening and her passion for baking. John listened patiently, his eyes filled with understanding and empathy. He learned about her kindness, her resilience, and her unwavering spirit. As the days passed, Martha began to heal, both physically and emotionally. The bruises on her body faded, and the wounds on her heart began to mend. She found purpose in helping around the ranch, and she felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced since Thomas's death. The loneliness that had haunted her for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of peace and contentment. She and John developed a quiet but deep friendship, based on mutual respect and understanding. They found solace in each other's company, sharing laughter and tears, and supporting each other through difficult times. The ranch became more than just a safe haven for Martha. It became a home, a place where she could finally find peace and happiness again. News of John's kindness towards Martha spread quickly through Oakhaven. At first, many of the townspeople were ashamed of their behavior. They realized that their desperation had led them to act in a way that was completely out of character. Some even felt a pang of guilt for the way they had treated Martha, remembering her past kindnesses and her willingness to always lend a helping hand. The Burkes, however, remained defiant. They continued to spread rumors about Martha, accusing her of manipulating John and taking advantage of his generosity. They tried to convince others that she was a burden on the community and that John was being foolish to support her. But their efforts were largely unsuccessful. Many of the townspeople, witnessing Martha's transformation at the ranch and hearing stories of her helpfulness and her cheerful spirit, began to question their own prejudices. They saw that she was not a burden, but a valuable member of the community, deserving of respect and compassion. One day, a group of women from Oakhaven decided to visit Martha at the ranch. They brought with them gifts of food and clothing, tokens of their remorse and their desire to make amends. They apologized to Martha for their cruel behavior and expressed their admiration for her strength and resilience. Martha, her heart filled with forgiveness, welcomed them with open arms. She assured them that she held no grudges and that she understood the difficult circumstances that had led them to act as they did. The visit marked a turning point in the relationship between Martha and the townspeople. It was the beginning of a reconciliation, a journey towards healing and forgiveness. The ice that had gripped Oakhaven began to thaw, replaced by a glimmer of hope and a renewed sense of community. Inspired by Martha's forgiveness and John's unwavering generosity, the townspeople decided to take action to help others in need. John, with his natural leadership and organizational skills, spearheaded the effort. He called a town meeting, where he spoke passionately about the importance of community and compassion. He proposed a plan to pool their resources and create a food bank to help those who were struggling to feed their families. He encouraged everyone to contribute what they could, whether it was food, money, or their time. He also suggested organizing a clothing drive to provide warm garments for those who were ill-equipped to face the harsh winter. The response was overwhelming. People who had previously been consumed by their own fears and anxieties now eagerly offered their support. Farmers donated surplus crops, merchants provided goods at discounted prices, and ordinary citizens volunteered their time and energy. Even some of those who had initially been skeptical or resistant were eventually won over by the spirit of cooperation and generosity. The food bank quickly became a lifeline for many families in Oakhaven. People who had been on the brink of starvation were now able to receive regular meals. The clothing drive provided warm coats, hats, and gloves for those who had been shivering in the cold. John also organized workshops to teach people valuable skills, such as gardening, cooking, and mending clothes. These workshops empowered people to become more self-sufficient and less reliant on outside assistance. The community of Oakhaven was slowly but surely rebuilding itself, stronger and more resilient than before. The harsh winter had tested their limits, but it had also revealed the best of their humanity. As the winter began to wane, and the first signs of spring appeared, Martha's spirit bloomed along with the wildflowers. She took on a more active role in the community, sharing her knowledge of gardening and baking with others. She helped organize social gatherings, bringing people together to share stories and celebrate their newfound unity. She even reached out to the Burkes, offering them a gesture of forgiveness and understanding. While they remained resistant at first, their hearts eventually softened, and they begrudgingly accepted her olive branch. They began to participate in community events, slowly integrating themselves back into the fabric of Oakhaven. Martha also started a small lending library at the ranch, offering books and magazines to those who craved knowledge and entertainment. She believed that education was essential to breaking the cycle of poverty and despair. John, watching Martha thrive, felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He knew that his act of kindness had not only saved her life but had also transformed the entire community. He continued to support her efforts, providing her with the resources and encouragement she needed to succeed. The ranch became a hub of activity, a place where people could gather, learn, and support each other. It was a testament to the power of kindness, compassion, and community. The harsh winter had left its mark on Oakhaven, but it had also revealed the strength and resilience of its people. And at the heart of it all was Martha, the lonely widow who had once been beaten and abandoned, now a beacon of hope and inspiration for everyone around her. Years passed, and Martha continued to live at the ranch, surrounded by love and friendship. The ranch became her true home, a place where she felt safe, valued, and cherished. She and John remained close, their bond deepening with each passing year. They were more than just friends. They were family. Oakhaven also prospered, thanks to the renewed sense of community and the spirit of cooperation that had taken root. The food bank continued to provide assistance to those in need, and the town's economy flourished. The harsh winter became a distant memory, a reminder of the importance of compassion and resilience. The Burkes, though still a bit gruff around the edges, became active members of the community, volunteering their time and resources to various causes. They even apologized to Martha for their past behavior, expressing their gratitude for her forgiveness and understanding. One sunny afternoon, as Martha sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching the children play in the fields, she reflected on her life. She had faced hardship and loss, but she had also experienced kindness and love. She had learned that even in the darkest of times, there was always hope, and that even the smallest act of compassion could make a world of difference. She smiled, her heart filled with gratitude. She was no longer the lonely, abandoned widow who had been beaten and left for dead. She was Martha, a beloved member of the community, a friend, a mentor, and an inspiration to all who knew her. She was finally truly safe, and she knew that Thomas would be proud of her. And so, the story of Martha and John became a legend in Oakhaven, a testament to the transformative power of kindness and the enduring strength of the human spirit. It was a story told and retold, passed down from generation to generation, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can always be found. The townspeople learned to embrace compassion, to support each other, and to never turn a blind eye to those in need. They understood that true strength lay not in hoarding resources or protecting themselves at the expense of others, but in working together to create a better world for everyone. The ranch continued to be a sanctuary, a place where people could find comfort, support, and a sense of belonging. Martha and John welcomed everyone with open arms, sharing their wisdom, their love, and their unwavering belief in the goodness of humanity. The harsh winter that had once threatened to destroy Oakhaven ultimately brought them closer together, forging bonds that would last a lifetime. It taught them the importance of community, the value of forgiveness, and the power of kindness to overcome even the most daunting adversity. And as the sun set over the rolling hills surrounding Oakhaven, casting a warm golden glow over the land, Martha knew that she had finally found her place in the world. She was surrounded by loving friends, cherished by her community, and deeply connected to the land she called home. She was safe, she was loved, and she was at peace. The story of the lonely widow who had been beaten for asking for food had become a story of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of the human heart. The end.